Hello, Transmission64. My name's Travis, also known as Sensorium. Very happy to be here today, ready to talk to you about the TeensyROM cartridge for the C64 and 128. Thank you very much to Slagon for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Today we're going to talk about the features of the TeensyROM, and then we'll drill down into the ASID and music-specific features in a little more detail. And we'll take a little time to talk about some of the tech details around the TeensyROM general implementation and ASID specifically. So, lots to cover today. Let's get started. I'd like to start things off today by showing you what types of files can be loaded with the TeensyROM and how quickly they load. Files can be loaded from one of three different sources: a micro SD card, which is pretty common for these types of things, a USB thumb drive, which is a little more unique, and incorporated into the flash itself, into the firmware, are over 70 files already included, so you don't actually have to have any external devices or flash cards to get started playing with it. Let's start off by looking at ROM emulation via CRT files. With this, I always like to mention our friend StatMat's OneLoad64 collection, which has over 2,000 games just made for one-load cartridges like this. So if we select one in the list here, hit return, and it's immediately running. It doesn't have to load any memory, any of the RAM, and any data into the RAM of the C64. It just emulates the cartridge, issues a reset, and we're off and running. So we can navigate. If you notice there's 113 pages, which is quite a few. We can navigate more quickly by hitting the first letter of the file we want to look at. And we jump down to that, and then we can find it and quickly get started. Let's do one more. So let's jump up to the F's. I always like Fix It Felix. And there it is. And we're off and running. Next, I'd like to show you program or P00 files, which are pretty similar. I always like to demonstrate that using Super Mario Brothers because it's, as you notice here, 48K in size, which is, of course, about 3/4 of all the memory available within the 64. That would take quite some time to load off of a floppy or tape. So when we hit return here, we're going to count the time. 1, 2, and we're loaded and running. So about 2 seconds to load a full 3/4 of the entire memory of the C64. Next, let's look at the SID file player. And the TeensyROM supports about 90% of known SIDs out there. There's a few of them that are still a little tricky. Hope to increase that number as we go by. So once we select one, it's immediately loaded and starts playing in the background. As you can see, there's a summary screen shown here with information out of the header of the SID file itself, as well as information regarding this machine that it's playing on, whether it's PAL or NTSC. And it therefore adjusts the song playback speed depending on what kind of machine it is. As you can see, you can also select a sub-song number and adjust the speed on the fly if you want to fine-tune or play around with accelerated SID files. Next, I'd like to show you the picture viewer. So we've got a few of those here. Once again, we just select it in the menu, hit return, and it immediately loads it and displays it. We can scroll through these fairly quickly. Say hi to my dog there. As you can see, I'm a classic rock fan. And there's quite a few types, as you can see from the list there. And then last but certainly not least, I'd like to show you the D64 files. You scroll into those. Can't talk and type at the same time here. So D64, here's one. So you just navigate inside of it as you would a subdirectory. Choose the program you want to launch, and we're off and running. There you go. Next up, I'd like to show you the NFC Launch System for TeensyROM. Kind of gives a physical representation of the old school cartridge plug-in, only with the latest and greatest technology. It's designed using these low-cost NFC tags that are about the size of a credit card in most cases, but they also sell them in stickers and other little formats you can pick up. This approach was developed by the Top 2 team originally for Mister, And we actually cross-support the same kind of readers, cards, and the data on the cards themselves. So we've got some compatibility there. This is a collaborative development with StatMat, once again, of OneLoad64 fame. He observed the Tap2 in action and brought it to my attention. We worked together on it, and he added some of his special fast load sauce, and we brought it all together. So to make it work, you simply take one of the cards and set it on the reader here, and the game launches. Here's another one. Get the idea there. Pretty straightforward. Hi, Adrian. To program a card is also pretty straightforward. We just navigate to the game we want, or game, or any program really, that we want to program with, and instead of hitting enter to launch it, we hit the left arrow to bring up the programmer interface, and it walks you through the rest. Tells me to put a card on the reader, hit return, it's programmed, that's done. Back to here, and now we've got a program card that we can simply launch with. Fun stuff. Next, I'd like to talk to you about the TeensyROM desktop UI and command line interface applications. These allow you to control your C64 from a modern computer. You can do things like instantly remote launch games, SIDs, pictures, any of the files shown in the previous slides there. You can also transfer files without having to remove the USB or SD card from your TeensyROM. You can discover new content with its excellent search capabilities, not only search file names, but associated metadata information to immediately find what you're looking for. And when you do find that, you can flag it for follow-up later and find it again quickly. You can turn your C64 into a retro jukebox, as it has SID file length information and can sequentially playback SID files. There's some great random features, so you can jump around and discover new content that way. It incorporates metadata from the 3 sources listed there, so you get things like pictures of composers, such as our friend Slagon there, and snapshots of games, screen captures, and things like that. Code developers and composers will find it handy, as there's a watch directory feature which immediately transfers files once they're created and launches them on your C64. The command line interface application is cross-platform capable and gives you a retro feel. These were all developed by William Pereira, also known as Hex, and there's so much more to show on this. I wish I had the time, but I'd highly recommend going to his YouTube channel listed there and checking out his detailed demo videos. He also has detailed descriptions on the GitHub repositories for both the applications, which are both listed there as well. Definitely recommend checking them out. It's some really cool stuff. Just a few more features I'd like to talk about on the TeensyROM. The first is the Ethernet interface. Emulates a SwiftLink cartridge at 38.4K. Therefore, you can use it with any of the popular terminal software out there and connect to Telnet BBS, which are still very popular, such as our friends at Oasis BBS. It emulates a text-based web browser, so you can actually search the web using your C64. It can render those sites to text in most cases and has a built-in search engine via FrogFind. And you can download files directly to your SD or USB drive and launch them directly from the web browser. There's a set of custom basic commands that were recently added to be able to load and save programs from BASIC, as well as communicate over a serial USB for data communications. There's an Autolaunch capability to let you immediately boot into any program you like. You can set the C64 system time from the internet, and you can do firmware updates directly from a hex file plopped onto your SD or USB drive for quick updates. So, I'd like to spend the rest of this video talking about MIDI. It's been a very popular feature for the TeensyROM. So we're going to divide this into 3 sections. We're going to show a demo real quick here of some MIDI controllers that you can plug into the TeensyROM. We're going to talk about ASID and its implementation, which is very unique to the TeensyROM. And then we'll have some clips of hybrid demos integrating MIDI and ASID together. So with that in mind, we're going to start with some MIDI controllers. Off we go. Lots of MIDI controllers out there and plenty of room for more. So now let's talk about ASID, beginning with how to pronounce it. You probably heard me incorrectly pronounce it as ASID previously. That was recently corrected. This was invented by a Swedish company called Electron, and their preferred pronunciation is indeed ASID. So I apologize for that, and I'll try to make sure I get it right in the future here. So what is ASID? It's a way to send SID-specific register information over the MIDI transport using sysx messages. This gives you very low-level control over your SID chip, much more so than MIDI alone could provide. This was originally developed by Electron for the SidStation product. TubeSoccer came along and brought it all to the next level. He added the capability to the ThorapSID product. He added it to DeepSID and SID Factory 2 applications. He expanded on the protocol for multiple SIDs, among other things, such as a method to control timing data on the fly, as well as order of application of the registers. That was demonstrated in X 2024. Now, the ThorapSID and SidStation are products which use a classic SID chip, but with a more modern processor around it. Up till this point, the only way to use ASID on a real C64 was by the use of the Station 64 product by DJ Indicator. That's where the TeensyROM comes in. The TeensyROM adds to that capability by, first of all, using USB for faster communications. It does the decoding from the ASID protocol into SID register information external to the C64, and it also incorporates a frame retimer for correction of some jitter that we'll see in upcoming here. So I want to talk about some of the ASID sources out there and their clock characteristics as far as what the clock looks like coming out of them. So first of all is the DeepSID application, which is a web-based app that's probably the most popular. It has access to over 50,000 SIDs, pretty much every one in existence, and applies them via the Web MIDI interface. Unfortunately, that Web MIDI interface seems to have quite a bit of random jitter associated with it. The SID Factory 2 application for SID development and editing has a fairly good clock, but it has some deterministic jitter to it that is correctable by the timer. The ASID XP application was the original one by Electron, and that clock is actually fairly stable on its own. The ChipSynth64 product was recently released with ASID support by Plog Software. It's not a SID player per se, but turns your C64 or SID chip into a synthesizer of its own and has some really cool features you should check out. And the last one is the SID Play application for Mac. Unfortunately, I haven't got a chance to test that one out yet. So let's talk in a little more detail about the TeensyROM ASID Player implementation. So out of any of the sources mentioned on the previous slide, the data comes out via USB at a much faster rate than traditional MIDI and brought into the TeensyROM's USB input connector. And the first thing that happens is that sysx packets are decoded into something that the SID chip will ultimately understand. This takes a little bit of processor power. Not that it can't be done inside of the C64, but the Teensy chip itself is quite a bit faster and takes a lot of that load away from the C64. So that decodes that packet and loads it into a buffer. And then out of that buffer, the data is applied when the timer is turned on, one frame at a time with very precise timing control to the TeensyROM ASID application running on the C64 and immediately applied to the SID chip itself. The control of that timer takes input from multiple sources to correctly time that data on its output. So I'm going to switch now to show you some video. This is going to start out with a visual demonstration of the ASID player itself for TeensyROM, and then transition into some both visual and audio comparisons of the three main sources shown on the previous slide, as well as an oscilloscope picture in the same shot to give you a visual representation of that jitter and how the TeensyROM cleans it up with its frame timer. And then after that, we'll go into some 3-SID ASID demonstrations, as well as a couple of the other ASID sources. So off we go. All right, this last section kind of brings everything together. It shows the SID use as a synth module as part of a larger orchestration controlled by the M8 Tracker, Chip Synth64, Ableton Live, etc. These were all composed and performed by William, also known as Hex, and Avracadabra. Both have been huge champions of the TeensyROM, and I really appreciate all their help in this. I also like to shout out a big thank you to the entire TeensyROM community for all their help throughout this whole development process. Without further ado, here we go. Thank you so much to Slagon and Transmission64 for this opportunity. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much to the people on the previous slide. It's a large community, and I certainly couldn't do this alone. Thank you all so much. If you're looking for more information on the TeensyROM or perhaps where to purchase one, here's some info for you. Thanks again, and we'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.